I know I've recommended Ohara Davies's videos on his YouTube channel several times before, but this is one of the best videos he's done to date. And I've said this previously, I really don't understand why more professional boxers don't utilize YouTube as a platform to grow their fan base and connect with their fans, because it's a much, much better platform from my perspective than Twitter or Instagram or any of those platforms, which, you can't really have proper conversations. You can't really explain yourself properly on Twitter and Instagram, and you can't really give the fans a proper insight into the kind of person you are and the kind of life you live as a professional boxer. So yeah, I don't understand why more fighters don't do what Ohara Davies is doing. Maybe some of you guys could throw around some explanations. But in this particular video, he talks about the psychological hurdles that he is having to overcome dealing with his loss to Josh Taylor. He's very honest, he's very candid in this video about the fact that he still hasn't come to terms with a loss, about the fact that he still can't quite accept the fact that he lost in his own mind. He still hasn't watched the fight back. He doesn't like to think about the fight. When people ask him questions about the fight, he ignores the questions. This is what he's being honest about in this video, is dealing with the psychological trauma of losing. And he also talks about the mindset that he has as a fighter, the mindset that he's had as a very young amateur. And his mindset always was, I'm invincible. And he says, I know it sounds crazy, but I always felt that I was invincible and that fate owes me the victory. And this is something I certainly understand, and it's not something that surprises me at all. It's the kind of thing I talk about a lot on my channel, is the psychology of fighters, because so much of boxing is psychology, so much of it is mental. You can have all the physical tools and all the physical ability, but if you don't have your mind right, that can affect your performance, and that can make the difference between winning and losing. A loss can also hurt your confidence. A good example of that would be when Lucian Bute lost to Carl Froch. Lucian Bute was mentally and emotionally wrecked after the Carl Froch fight. I remember it when he fought Denis Grachev. I think that was his first fight back after Carl Froch. Grachev really is a poor fighter, and he visibly shook Lucian Bute several times in that fight and had Lucian Bute looking scared to death. It took Lucian Bute, I want to say, a couple of years to get over the psychological trauma of the Carl Froch fight. But once he got over the psychological trauma of the Froch fight, I actually think it made him stronger in the long run. Now, not all fighters can get over psychological trauma. Some fighters are never the same again. Jeff Lacey would be a good example. When Calzaghe gave him that beating, Jeff Lacey was never the same man after that. He was psychologically shot. But anyway, in this particular video here, Ohara Davies is talking about some of the psychological, the mental obstacles he's had to overcome and that he's still trying to overcome in dealing with that loss to Josh Taylor. Very interesting stuff. And people who don't think about the psychology of fighters in particular, those kind of people should watch this video, because you will learn some things here. You will think about things that you've never considered before, and you'll have a new respect for fighters. A lot of people don't really respect fighters, man. I noticed this when I was young. When I used to box myself, as a teenager, I would watch fights, the big fights and what have you, with my friends. And they'd see someone get knocked out and they'd say things like, oh, that guy shouldn't be boxing. How can you get knocked out like that? How can you get knocked out with one punch? This guy's clearly garbage. He's rubbish. Who gets knocked out with one punch? This is the kind of thing they were saying. And these are people who have never laced up a pair of gloves in their lives. And today you see it all the time with the Twitter culture and whatnot. You see people coming out with all these comments about fighters, and this one's a coward and that one's a coward, and this one's rubbish and that one's rubbish, and how could he lose like this, and how he's garbage, and they really don't have respect for fighters. When you understand, when you've actually fought yourself, it gives you a different perspective. But if you haven't fought, but you actually listen to fighters, like Ohara Davies here in this video, it will help you put yourself in their shoes, and therefore have a greater understanding and hopefully gain more respect for the fighters, because there's a tremendous amount of psychological pressure that fighters go through. Yeah. And remember, these fighters, if you're someone who's not a fighter, not a professional fighter, you don't go through the same psychological stress that fighters do. Yeah, you might have stress in your job or here, there, or wherever, but it's not the same as the stress that fighters go through, because you are training to fight, to physically fight another man. Not just any old man, a professional. A man who has trained most of his life to render people unconscious, who is diligent, who's experienced, who's come in there to try to take your head off and humiliate you in front of thousands or even millions of people. The kind of psychological pressure that puts on you, you can't understand that unless you've been in that situation, or unless you take time out to try and put yourself mentally in the shoes of a professional fighter. It's a tremendous amount of psychological pressure that they go through. Ohara Davies recently talked about his win, over his recent opponent, the guy he knocked out in 2 rounds. And he said he felt sorry for the guy, because straight after the fight, he was on social media and he saw people posting memes and all this kind of stuff, taking the piss, basically, out of the guy that he just knocked out. And he said, boxing is a horrible sport, because this guy who I just flattened, now he's going to get ridiculed by all the fans and whatnot, and made fun of after getting flattened. You have to be so psychologically tough to be a fighter, especially in this day and age with the social media and whatnot. You got to be so tough to have to deal with all that crap from the fans, because back in the days, the fans never really interacted with you like that. There was no social media. In the 90s, there was no internet, there was no social media. So fighters really only ever heard from the fans when they were in the arena. And at that point, they're in fight mode. When they're at the weigh-in maybe, and in the arena. But generally, they never really interacted with the fans. So it was easier back in the days for fighters to just focus on the fight. Whereas now, with social media, they're constantly getting abuse and this, that, and the other from fans. And again, these people really don't understand what it's like to be a fighter, and the pressures that you go through, the emotions that you go through. And therefore, they just don't have the respect that they should have. So I highly recommend this video. I highly recommend Ohara Davies' channel in general. He really is enlightening a lot of boxing fans out there. When I go through the comment section of his videos, that's all I see, is I see boxing fans saying, wow, I never thought about it that way, Ohara. Respect to you. I'd never thought that fighters go through this. I never realized it was like that. So, and again, most of the stuff Ohara says is stuff that I knew anyway. Because this is the kind of stuff I contemplate. This is the kind of person I am. I'm very interested in psychology, particularly the psychology of fighters, not just boxers, by the way, just fighters in general. The psychology of warriors. This is something I've been interested in my whole life, actually. Before I even realized that I was interested in psychology, I was interested in psychology. I just didn't know it was called psychology, even as a child. But yeah, for people who are not really wired that way and not really so interested in the human mind and learning how people tick, you will be enlightened watching a lot of Ohara Davies' videos, because he gives great insight into the mindset of a fighter, the life of a fighter, the behind the scenes stuff that goes on with promoters and managers and trainers and all that kind of thing. So yeah, it's the only channel of its kind that I'm aware of at the moment, a professional fighter, certainly in the UK, who makes regular videos and gives deep insights. No other pro fighter that I know of is doing this. So I recommend you all go subscribe to Ohara Davies' channel if you're interested in all the stuff that I've just highlighted here. So yeah, check it out and let me know what you think in the comments, people. It's Hatman, I'm out.